Folks, in the last 2 weeks since Ascent Seattle, we've already seen a ton of shifts in the Grand Archive TCG metagame, so this is going to be another meta update video. We're going to look at a total of 8 lists in this video. These are all lists that have performed well, have at least top cut a regional in the past few weeks. From NA to Southeast Asia to Oceania, these are 8 decks that you're going to need to know if you're planning on playing competitively. You might be even considering playing these in an upcoming tournament, or maybe you're not going to a big one, you just want to shake up your local experience. You're tired of losing to Burst Asunder or something. Well, we've got some lists for you to look at, so let's dig right into them. What's up everyone, it's Dan with Main Deck and welcome back to another Abyssal Heaven meta update video for the Grand Archive trading card game. In these videos, we're going to be providing you a bunch of deck lists that have been performing recently. In this one, it's going to be, like I mentioned in the intro, 8 total deck lists. We're not going to be deep diving into any of them, really. This isn't like a major strategic discussion, but it is going to be a discussion about the lists, the unique things they're doing, their place in the metagame right now. And if you want to grab these lists for yourself, share them with your friends, talk about them, build them, the links to all of the deck lists on Shout at Your Decks will be down in the description below. So without any further ado, let's jump right into this. The metagame, of course, has been really going wild since Ascent Seattle. We had the rise of the Burst Asunder deck and a huge, very aggressive metagame with a lot of fire decks performing really well. And what we are seeing in the past couple weeks since Ascent Seattle is a shift towards mid-range, which is very much what we expect to see in a normal metagame. We have these decks coming out, mid-range decks that are coming out and trying to just sort of outvalue the aggressive decks. They say, okay, you can push damage, that's fine, but we're just going to clear your board, we're going to stop your damage, and then you're going to run out of steam and we're going to have the advantage. And so when we're looking at these 8 lists, we're really going to be kind of framing this from the perspective of, as we've seen in some of like the huge regionals that took place in Southeast Asia, a lot of players are bringing these mid-range lists and actually stomping out some of the aggressive lists that were performing super well at Seattle, and even giving the Fractal deck, the Burst Asunder deck, a run for its money. So the first few lists we're going to look at are all going to be variants of what we see as the return of a classic archetype, Wind Allies. And we did see a little bit of this in Seattle. But if you look at the Southeast Asia metagame, these ally lists are everywhere. And then beyond that, we've seen some really cool other ones performing well. The first one we're going to look at is going to be a very classic Wind Lorraine ally deck. However, we're going to mention some pretty unique things that are in here as well that you're going to need to know, because these are cropping up everywhere now. The first thing, just for sort of the standard stuff we're seeing, yeah, this is a Wind Warrior ally deck running a lot of the allies you expect. We've got the Guruthos in here. Okay, we're running the Shang, which is the new tech out of Abyssal Heaven. Very difficult to deal with 2/3 ally. And we're doing things like Rally to Advance. We're doing things like Second Wind. We're just using the ability to put out some pretty big allies and then attack with them multiple times in the same turn with Rally to Advance and Second Wind. This is all just putting pressure. It's putting pressure on the Burst Asunder deck. It says, okay, you can go ahead and play Fractals. I'm just going to attack you. And it's going to take those aggro decks and clear their allies off the board and just kind of run them out of steam that way. This is even running some Tempest Downfalls, which is a really interesting thing that you don't normally see in Lorraine, just as a way of dealing some spell damage. This can be useful. It can kill units. It can hit your opponent's face. It's kind of a cool little piece of tech in here. And this list in general is pretty wild. It's just mostly like 3 copies of everything down the board. We also see a huge card cropping up here in the metagame now with Coronation Ceremony. Coronation Ceremony is a really flexible spell that allows you to give Spell Shroud to a unit of any kind. It can be your champion or an ally you control. And if it's a unique ally, which we do have some really important ones in here like Guruthos, then it's actually going to be just a 1-cost fast speed spell to do that. And we also see things like Incapacitate that just say, no, I'm going to counter your Burst Asunder. I'm going to force you to have Glimmering Refusals to deal with this, or you're not going to win, let alone, things that are going to wipe the board, all sorts of uses to all these little 2-copy, 3 copies in here. Now, one of the big things that we see, the big adaptations, this is Huaji of Heaven's Rise. Now, a lot of people saw this right away when it was spoiled and thought this was just a Djinn card, but actually it turns out as a 0-cost weapon, this is something that Lorraine can freely materialize when she goes to level 1. And the combo here is super cool. Huaji is a 1/2 weapon that allows unique warriors to use it. So we use Sun Se, Weapon Master from HVN, who is going to put an additional durability counter onto Huaji and then allow and then pump up the power of it as well. So it's going to be a 2-power weapon. And so with that Sunse and then the Huaji, we actually have what ends up being like a 2-3 weapon that Lorraine can use, and then Sunse as a unique warrior ally also can use it, as well as any other, like for example, Gildas can use this to crack in for even stronger. A combination of things like Huaji with Gildas pumped up by Sunse and then using something like Rallied Advance to attack with it again is just pumping out a crazy amount of damage in single turns. And that's where the pressure is really ramping up against those Burst Asunder decks and forcing them to just kind of fold too early before they can actually find the kill. So very cool to see this. It's just classic Lorraine list, but it does have some cool spice in it. Our next list we're looking at is actually a Wind Allies Kongming list, and this was the first place list from the Dunedin Regional in New Zealand, piloted by Maaadaaparkaar. This is really great to see, actually. This Wind Kongming is something that people have definitely been toying with. The main deck team has tested with this a little bit as well, and it's great to see some solid results from it. Of course, this Kongming list is backed up with, we have Kongming who applies the shifting currents, and then Ardent Cloud Striker is really kind of like the major beat stick and the force that you often will choose to play Kongming for specifically. Beyond the existence of Ardent Cloud Striker, as well as a couple of cards like Usurp the Winds and Woolen Lancer that are going to have you shifting the currents in certain ways in order to deal extra damage. Landscape Corsair as well is a great 2/3 for 3 that just has the simple on-enter, change your shifting currents. We have a series of some various unique allies backed up by Oath of the Sakura. In this deck, Oath of the Sakura is mostly just going to be the apply buff counters to allies effect, but we do actually have enough unique allies to get the 3 unique ally trigger in here, +2 until end of turn on everything. We have Shang, we have Gildas, and then we have Blanche, who is, of course, a unique ally that a lot of these ally lists are playing right now just to be able to put a hurdle in the face of Burst Asunder. And we have one more in here as well, which is Yuan Shao, Crown General, and this is a great little card to see. So this is a really cool tech piece, I think, in here. Now, this level 2+ ability to steal allies is not actually ever going to come into play because we don't have a way to go to level 2. However, the unique allies your opponents control having Pride 2 is a really strong effect against a lot of other decks, not only other Wind Ally decks, but those Fire Aggro decks we were looking at in our last video, the ones that are playing things like Red Hair, Arthur, and Xiao Chao. This actually just makes it really difficult for them to attack, let alone things like Sadie in Tristan lists at level 1. They have to be level 2 before they actually start attacking, which ruins a lot of that potential ability to gain preparation counters to Sadie. I actually think this Yuan Shao is a really cool piece of tech that more of these ally lists should be starting to run, which is, of course, the reason we're doing this video, to show off these really cool tech ideas. And then it also provides that additional source of a unique ally to be able to sometimes get that Oath of the Sakura to just pop off as well. So I think this list is really cool. I love the Yuan Shao in here. But otherwise, it's just a very solid Ardent Cloud Striker back to just play this attack, deal 6 damage. Sounds pretty good to me. The next list we're looking at, I am super excited about. I am a huge Jhin fan, so it is wonderful to see this. Not only is this a Jhin list, this is an allies list that goes to level 3. So we're really hitting a lot of the kind of rarer elements that you don't tend to see as often in these lists, but man, this is so cool. And yes, we're currently looking at Raise the Land in the sideboard. Raise the Land actually in the sideboard here. This plays 3rd at the Philippines Regional. Spirit of Wind, of course, all the way up to Jhin level 3. With the Jhin level 3, we're going to have the Berserker Plate. We're going to have the Huaji. We have the Windspire Crest in here too, by the way. Windspire Crest in here. This is normally just a Dao-Chan bonus card, and you would think, why is this not Portentous Tengu, which would just be better than Windspire Crest? There is some spice in here. So let's take a quick look at this. We are doing the thing the Lorraine list we looked at earlier we were talking about before with that Huaji of Heaven's Rise along with Sunse Weapon Master. In this case, we don't have the Lorraine to bring it out, but we do have Jin's Beseeching Flourish, which allows him to get extra pole arms out, which is a great way to get that Huaji out here, or the Sundering Moon, our other cool option. We're otherwise running, a bunch of just solid wind allies you expect. We've got the Guan Yus, we've got the Rose, and we're doing some things with Windmill Engineer, Reclaim, generating some advantage that way. Just one copy of Zhang Fei, just as another option. I love this though. I want to talk about this because this is super exciting. Infusion of Crescent Jade. This card did not see much play in the AMB meta, but it might be time. It might be time for this to come pop off a little bit. Now, the ability to give a polearm weapon +1 until end of turn for each wind element non-champion object you control. Meaning that it's going to hit our Windmill Engineers, our Wind Rider Vanguards, our Guan Yus, our Roses. All of these allies are going to add to the amount of buff that you get here. And note that a lot of those were unique allies, right? Because we're going to put this buff onto Huaji of Heaven's Rise, and then we're going to be able to attack with all of those unique warrior allies using that Huaji. If we get that Sunset out there to get the extra durability, then we can attack with more of them, more attacks per turn. We also have the ability to use Jin's level 2 ability to attack twice in a turn, so we can put the infusion on and onto the Huaji or onto the Sundering Moon and attack with Jin twice. The Sundering Moon, of course, will be counted in that infusion amount, and Windspire Crest as well. You can put the Windspire Crest out and then just use the infusion, put it out as just another wind object. I think that is super cool. I love seeing tech like that. There's some other important tech in here to notice. Stifling Trap, which is really, really good at dealing with those Zhang Zhaos right now to try and deny your opponent that extra card advantage. And then when we do get all the way up to, I wanted to mention this before I get there too, 2 copies of Turbocharge. Keep that in mind. This is not the only time we're talking about in this video, but the respect for, it's really good to draw 2 cards. So we're going to run 2 copies to use with as a backup charger. I think that's awesome. But then when we get to level 3 here, all we're doing at level 3 natively in the main deck is going to be Menflesh and Relentless Outburst. And honestly, I think this is really smart. Menflesh we pegged this a long time ago. This is like obviously the strongest Jin card. This Recover 8 is a massive, massive way to just kind of get back in the game, close out, just remove the amount of damage your opponent has dealt, kind of like time walking, almost saying like, you know what, those last turn or 2, they didn't matter. Going to this Jin level 3 says, feel free to Burst Asunder me. Go for it. Shoot the Burst Asunder at me. On my turn, I'm just going to recover back down, stay alive, punch you more, and then you have to, the Fractal deck has to kill with their refracting missiles or their shimmering refractions. Otherwise, they are going to have trouble actually pinning Jin down. We also have Relentless Outburst, and I like using this in the Jin deck because the Jin deck is, your opponent's often going to tech in things like Song of Frost, ways to stop the Huaji attacks because those get really out of control. And Relentless Outburst provides you with a non-spell, non-attack way of dealing the damage. The opponent has to basically like incapacitate it or something, or use a general damage prevention of some kind, which aren't super common outside of decks like Tristan right now. So this is actually pretty tough to deal with. The opponent's not often going to bring in Safeguard Amulet, which is like the thing that's really good against Jin. And if Jin just pushes his damage high enough, this just hits for 12 and then causes all of these little other ally attacks you might have out here from things like Dungeon Guide, Purifier, your unique allies, your Swift Recruits are all going to deal 1 extra damage as well when you hit the damage threshold, which is just going to let you close the game out. So love this, love seeing this. Sideboard, we do have those Annihilations. We do have some Enrage in here too. If you just feel like, well, my opponent's not going to, be able to stop the attack, so let's just Enrage and kill. I love that as well. That's great. And then Raise the Land. Shu Chang, right? Get rid of that Shu Chang, which is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool little tech to see here. So yeah, I love this list. Another cool ally option, bringing Jin to the table. So congrats to ahuinan for the 3rd place at the Philippines Regional with that Jin list. Now we're going to be looking at some variants of some decks that we saw to Ascent Seattle, and these are still very powerful decks. In this case, we're going to look at a fire aggro deck, but one that we didn't talk about in the last video. This is actually Arisanna fire aggro, and it's a pretty straightforward list. It's doing a lot of the things that the Dao Chan list does, except it's got this focus on using the gather mechanic to deal extra damage. So we are still using the power of Searing Rebuke here to prevent damage to ourselves and then actually ping damage onto ourselves to trigger that 3 damage back at the opponent's champion each time. And in this case, we get to use that with the powerful card Cinderbloom Tender, which is going to say whenever you gather, deal 1 damage to each champion. So if you have a Cinderbloom Tender out, at the start of your turn, you're Searing Rebuke, you're targeting yourself, prevent the damage, and then you go ahead and use a Slash and Burn to gather up to 3 times, or maybe you go to a level 2 to gather a couple of times. You have a couple of options here. But as long as you gather a few times, you can trigger that Cinderbloom Tender each time. If you gather 3 times, it's ping, ping, ping at both players, but then that Searing Rebuke is going to kick in, and for each damage that will be dealt to you, it's going to deal 3 to the opponent. So it's going to be 3 from the Tender, plus 3 times 3 for the 3 prevention from the Searing Rebuke, meaning a total of 12 damage shot at the opponent, kind of out of nowhere. So this deck is really straightforward. It's kind of doing that stuff. It's using Cinder Geyser to deal damage. It's using Kindling Flare once it's gathered all those herbs to then sack the herbs to deal a whole bunch more damage to the opponent. And then otherwise just doing some basic like attack, play Clumsy Apprentice, play Hasty Messenger, attack, Ignite Fate to deal damage and get that float. Honestly, pretty straightforward stuff. Cremation Ritual to draw cards, increasing danger. It's got a lot like an old Erupting Rhapsody list, honestly, except instead of doing an Erupting combo, it's just going to Cinder Geyser and Rebuke. So very solid list to play. Actually, DragonJG, we have to talk about here. This event took first place at the regional that happened at the same weekend as Ascent Seattle, but then there was a regional the following weekend where DragonJG brought this exact same list and took 5th at that one. So consistent performer, consistent list, powerful aggro list. Even though we have these mid-range lists coming up, aggro is not totally gone, everyone. You can totally just keep playing sweet aggro lists like this Arisanna list. So well done, DragonJG. Great list. Definitely take a look at that if this looks like it's up your alley. Now, another deck that we saw, it's in Seattle. Just want to point out a couple of things that Guruthos, who's a very, very skilled, talented player, has a lot of top placements as well. Guruthos brought this one to the Michigan Regional and then also played it in the Yeti Online Regional and actually won the Yeti Online Regional the following day with this. So this is a really solid list, and Guruthos just this is Win Tristan. I should mention that part. Win Shadowstrike Tristan list. And this is has a lot of similarities to the list we saw at Seattle, but there's some really important, cool tech in here that I have to mention. And this is that Guruthos is actually running mainboard Staggering Strike. And this is a card that we're starting to see more play because various Xander and Tristan lists are using Slice and Dice and getting early kills. And Shattering Strike is a great way to just kind of shut those decks out. If you can hit a Shattering Strike and remove 3 prep counters from Tristan early or from Xander, who's trying to build up to a Slice and Dice, you can completely end their game plan. Buy yourself a ton of time now to go ahead and close the game out. But Guruthos is so afraid of that in here as well, that they're running Slime Shield main in the Tristan list just as a way to prevent that 3 damage to their champion. Slime Shield here is also a win card, which allows it to be used when imbuing for our Windmill Engineers or our Verdigris Decree that we're going to bring in from the side. So it's actually, this is a pretty cool little piece of tech. That 3 prevention not only is going to prevent Staggering Strike from getting its on champion hit effect, as this is naturally a 3 damage attack, but also it prevents Slice and Dice, unless it's buffed up from something else, from getting its on hit effect. So you can use it both against other Slice and Dices and against the Staggering Strikes that are going to stop your Slice and Dices. So really cool little extra tech there. And of course, we're running the Penumbral Waltz in here, having that respect for things like Burst Asunder, another one in the sideboard. And then other than that, it is a fairly straightforward Tristan list with the Shadow Reaver in the side as well. Some Brackish Ludus, another nice tech piece, I guess, again, respecting like the mill decks that we haven't talked about too much in these videos, but that are creeping around in these top cuts as well. But yeah, this is if you're looking for to play Wind Tristan, which is a really, really solid aggro deck, or excuse me, solid mid-range deck right now that has really been showing its place in the meta. Definitely a great list to take and run with. All right, now let's talk about our boy Main Deck Mitch, who won the Michigan Regional. And this is not a way to beat Burst Asunder. This is Mitch playing what he decided was the current best version of Burst Asunder. So if you are enjoying playing Burst Asunder or you need to know what you're teching against, this is the current version that Mitch was playing. Now, of course, as we talk about, every event you go to is going to have a slightly different metagame. In this one, Main Deck Mitch felt like there were going to be too many ally decks, too many aggro decks still, and wanted to play the Arisanna version instead of the Dao-Chan main in order to try and beat those, but did still sideboard into that Dao-Chan level 1 with the Scepter of Fascination against other Burst Asunder lists. The Arisanna here, of course, gives us access to Polaris, allows us to wipe boards, but the other cool new little piece of tech in here that you have to be aware of is running Gildas in this deck. Gildas in the main allows us to actually fight other mid-range decks, allows us to beat those ally decks by just playing Gildas and attacking them, playing kind of their own game, or against other Burst Asunder lists, lets you put out additional pressure, gives you another way to win the game. The combination of Gildas with Frosthorn Paladins gives you actually a chunk of allies that do a chunk of real damage. And by leveraging all those allies and then the normal Burst Asunder game plan with tons and tons and tons of fractals, Mitch was able to fight his way all the way to winning the Michigan Regional against a lot of other powerful decks, aggro decks, and some other cool decks that we're going to take a look at. One more we'll take a look at in a second here. And so this was a great adaptation, a great list to play. And if you're looking for a version of Burst Asunder to play or to play test against, definitely look at this one, because we are already seeing this version being copied. It got played in the Yeti Regional the next day as well. Definitely a solid list. Now we had a super cool new deck show up at the Michigan Regional as well. This was second place by Yoitsu, and this is Water Robots Dao-chan. I love this list so much. This is so cool. So we're using Dao-chan level 1, and yep, that is a Mercurial Heart in the main as well. This deck was so much fun to watch play, though. It is actually surprisingly powerful. It has some really, really cool kill lines out of nowhere because it can make a crazy amount of power cells using the power of things like Cell Converter. And then we have Manufacture Cells in here. It gets to run 3 copies of Turbocharge in here. I'm actually surprised it wasn't 4. And then it also runs pretty much everything you can imagine to try and utilize these power cells as best as possible. You have Automated Gardener, Academy Attendant for some extra automatons to swing with, Cell Assembler, another way to make these power cells, Charge Mannequin, a cheap, effective beater once you have a power cell in play. This was, and this is what Yoitsu said they built the deck around, but Critical Recovery is a Cleric spell reaction. That means that Dao-chan can play it out of memory using the Glimmer counters. And this Critical Recovery, every time we saw this get played, it totally blew out the opponent who was trying to just spend attacks to do things like get this Cell Converter off the board. And the Cell Converter is so good because even once you do get it off the board, because we're a Cleric, we have that floating memory as well. But this Summon Power Cell, the at end of turn Summon a Power Cell, this was crazy. This enabled so much card draw from Turbocharge. It enabled Overlord Mark III to hit play. The Big Daddy Robot itself came in, intercepts Spellshroud, Steadfast, True Sight, draws a card at end of turn, puts a buff counter at end of turn, starts as a 5/5. If you try to attack it with your board, it Steadfast retaliates into everything. Otherwise, it's just going to beat you down. You can't stealth it to stop it. You can't use spells to stop it. It's just, Overlord's just so powerful. This is a very, very powerful ally. And yeah, this deck really played it well as just getting to run some tech. It had things like Frostbind. It ran the Shu-Chang's main to try and slow down other aggro decks. It got to run Blanches and Shang-Changs and just kind of, it played an allied game that also just put out a ton of power cells and either turns those into an Overlord or pumps them all into something like an Academy Attendant or a Gardener in order to just crack in for like 8 damage and close the game out of nowhere. Now, it did side into Arisanna with the Polaris as well to be able to deal with other ally lists, and I think that's really cool. I think it's really powerful. Something I also saw that I thought was extremely powerful in this list is utilizing cards like Wand of Frost in order to make the basically other ally decks just couldn't find good lines to kill this deck with, because as soon as you got the Cell Converters down, as long as you can protect them for kind of like one turn, have one turn after that where you get to build up your defenses, then you put out the Wand of Frost and you hold up these Critical Recoveries, and you're gonna be able to reduce the attack power of anything that tries to attack into these things, and then you're gonna heal them with the Critical Recovery so they don't die. And it makes it so just your board is so unassailable all the time. It really gives this deck a leg up against other ally decks. Not to mention power cells, just being able to sacrifice to pump up your own allies to get over thresholds. It means that all of the allies in this deck, these 2/3s, these 2/1s, get to attack in as if they had 4 power, which allows them to just beat the math on other decks that are playing Gildas or Frosthorn Paladins or, just anything like it. And of course, we're playing Frosthorn Paladins here as well, and Allied War Priestess to get that extra recovery against those fire aggro decks. Conjure Downpour, another card that did a ton of work just making it so their board couldn't deal with yours. This deck was truly like an ally killer mid-range deck, which is really cool. And it still was able to put up some really good pressure against other Burst Asunder lists and deal with the Fire Aggro list. This is a great deck. This is a really, really cool deck. Really happy to see this, and a great, surprisingly kind of out of nowhere deck powered up by Dao getting to get some free value with cards like Critical Recovery and Frostbind. So love this. Great list. Well done, Yoitsu. And there is a really fun finals match between Yoitsu and Main Deck Mitch that you can watch from the Michigan regional stream as well. Highly recommend that. And then the final list we're going to talk about, and I bet you did not expect to see this on your bingo card for this regional season, but yes, it is the return of Slimes, but with Serene Fire. I love this tech. I love this change. Previously with Sylvie, we always ran the 7. There were some people who toyed around a little bit with things like Fragmented, but it was very, very common to run the 7 card draw basic Spirit of Fire or basic Spirits in order to be able to have your turn 1 Baby Gray Slime escape the wreckage combo. Now, Baby Gray Slime gets banned. So what do? Well, let's just move to Serene Fire. Let's have a lot more health. Let's be able to not just get blown out by Burst Asunder or Fire Aggro lists all the time. And what do we lose when we lineage release? Just access to cards that we only wanted to play early anyway. Cremation Ritual, Creative Shock, Baby Red Slime. Once you get to level 3, you don't really want to... Slime Eruption is the only thing like you might want to play. So it's a very small loss to be able to keep playing the game. And instead, we're just going to play things like Ordinary Horse and Cremation Ritual it, right? Which is fine. It allows us to get our float going, start leveling, Limitless Slime, do the Library Witches. And we have actually, again, 2 copies of Turbocharge in here, respecting the advantage that you gain from finding one of these and using the backup charger on it. And then just going all the way to level 3, just like a usual slime strategy. Storm Slime, Ethereal Slime, Lustrous, all at 4 of. I like the Lustrous at 4 of here too, because when Ally Meta was a thing during the AMB season, Lustrous Slime was a clutch card to be able to hold them back. And that is, of course, as we talked about, a thing again. And then 4 copies of Gaia's Songbird to be able to find these things, because we are not running any Kind Beast Callers, which does surprise me a little bit. Kind Beast Caller is a really sweet card with Cremation Ritual as well. But I guess Ordinary Horse works too. And Stalwart Shieldmate as well. So just running a lot of just like basic Cremation Ritual deck, which Spirit of Serene Fire helps you dig and find those as well with that glimpse, which is really cool. So honestly, I love this list. I think this is really cool. I think Slimes are way under the radar right now. There is some tech that beats it, like Redirect Flow, but nobody's playing it. Nobody's playing that here. So Sungoria was able to steal a 10th place at the Yeti Online Regional with this slime list. And yeah, I don't know, guys. Maybe sleeve some Slimes up again, because it might be kind of a surprisingly powerful deck. I know there was one running around at Michigan Regional as well. So if we get some pretty skilled players bringing Slimes back into the metagame, I think it definitely could come back. But this is a deck that can actually blow a Burst Asunder deck out of the water too if they don't get a fast enough Fractal start, which I think makes it a pretty reasonable pick, all things considered. And there is I don't think this list is able to enable it at all, just looking at how it's set up, but just thinking about tech for the future, it is possible. If you can get to this level 5+ on Ethereal Slime and you can put a Covenant of Thorns on it, it's really hard for a Burst Asunder list to kill you with that setup. So that's kind of neat as well. But yeah, that's it. Those are all 8 lists that we look at. 3 ally lists: Tristan, Aggro Fire, Water, Burst Asunder. We had the Spicy Water Robots, and we had the Slime list. So lots of cool lists to consider in the ever-changing Grand Archive metagame. We will give you guys another HVN update, probably close to Nationals, and then a bunch more coming after Nationals. I think we're going to make this a staple of the channel, so if you do enjoy this, let me know in the comments below what you think of the videos and what you think of the deck lists we showed here today. Are there any favorites that you have? What are you going to be looking at playing or tweaking? Or what did I miss? What other deck lists are currently in the metagame that need to be covered? Let me know in the comments below. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all in the next one.